fine. The Doug McDermott, we asked and the Kings delivered. We asked for news to break
during our show.
Shout
out to Money.
I'm now more, because we wondered yesterday when the Doug McDermott news broke, is this the move?
Mm-hmm.
Was this the kind of response? Jalen McDaniels got traded. There's something else in the hopper. Was this it? And the further we get from the Jalen McDaniels trade, the more I think this is it. The more I think this is kind of the move.
Yeah.
And they're just giving themselves flexibility against the cap.
I think that's what we're learning. Like, I'm not going to say that like down the road that they're not going to make some move and go into the luxury tax.
Yeah.
And like, we don't know, we always like fight with Rory in the chat about what it is that all of this means and whether the Kings will ever go into the luxury tax. They might not. And they might also want to see what they have before they go into the luxury tax.
Yeah.
They might want to see how this team functions and looks on the court.
Sure.
And so when they make a move to save money like this, they save some money, but they also sent out like millions of dollars to cover part of his salary. But when you make a move like this, there's usually all of these mechanisms that we look at of like, why did you do this move? What advantages does it have? And one of the advantages is that you can go out and sign a guy like Doug McDermott and stay under the luxury tax.
Well, because how many times have we said, we don't know if the Kings will go into the tax? Maybe they won't.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be the thing that handcuffs them for the next 5 years because they're not willing to do that. I don't think that's the case, but we'll see. But we always talk about how if you're going to go into the tax, if you're going to do that, it has to be for that move that puts you over the top.
No,
yes. It has to be. If they're sitting at the trade deadline and they are number 2 in the West, and there's some player out there that they can go get in a trade that's going to put them into the luxury tax, but man, it makes them the best team in the West. It makes them real contenders. Then yeah, I would be stunned if they didn't do that. But anyways, Doug McDermott was not that move.
No.
And you're not going to go add Doug McDermott and be like, yeah, well, because if you're 1 penny into the luxury tax, it counts.
Yeah. So you no longer get the luxury tax like check.
Yes.
For the teams that are below the tax.
Yes.
And so again, if you're $1 million under the luxury tax and you go out and you sign Doug McDermott and he puts you $1 million over, all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of problems, right?
Yeah.
So
go ahead.
Yeah. What it does is it not only does it cost you the $1 million, you go $1 million over, it's dollar for dollar. So you owe $1 million in luxury tax dollar, and you don't get the 11, 12, 13 million dollars for revenue sharing from the luxury tax paying teams.
Right.
So again, that player better be worth it. If there was a player that you thought would impact like 4 or 5 wins, okay, I'm in.
Yeah, for sure.
But like, I don't think anyone is expecting that Doug McDermott is going to have that type of impact on the Kings. He's a veteran that you would like to have because he can shoot and because he's a good teammate and because he's a smart basketball player and he knows his role. He's all of those things matter.
You feel way better about Doug McDermott playing 10 minutes than you did Jalen McDaniels.
Yes, exactly.
And that's I think kind of the long and short of it here.
Yeah. And there's a cost to do that. My only concern is that whether you're going to regret that cost down the road.
Sure.
And like we talked about this a little bit before we came on, like, let's just say that the Kings did want to go out and trade for a guy like Brandon Ingram. We see these rumors out there. The Kings aren't done. They might still be interested in Brandon Ingram or Zach LaVine. First of all, the Zach LaVine thing, just punt into space. Like, I don't want to get into all the semantics of it, but if you have it, what it would take for the Kings to accumulate $35 million plus in salary in order to get Zach LaVine, to trade out players to get Zach LaVine and still stay under the hard cap, which at, the 178.1 million, whatever it is, the first apron. In order to do that, what it would take is just like crazy talk. And there's almost no way to do it. But to get to the Brandon Ingram contract, so he's at 36 million, you're going to have some confusion as to how much money you have to actually come up with in order to trade him. But if you're chasing a Brandon Ingram and you're going to go make, we all kind of can piece together the salaries that work. You can't trade Malik Monk. You can't trade DeMar DeRozan because they just signed their deals and you have to wait 6 months. But that means that you're looking at like contract like Kevin Huerter's, a contract like Trey Lyles, and then you need another $4 or $5 million contract. And yesterday, 2 days ago, it was Jalen McDaniels that would have fit into that deal, and the deal would work for those three players. And then whatever compensation, draft compensation, whatever. The only way that deal works now is with Devin Carter. And that's because you still have to match that money because you're going over the cap. So now you're like, okay, or can you piece together, can you get a team like New Orleans to take on, I don't know, two other young players? But even like we're talking Colby Jones, you don't have another player that you could throw in on top of that. And so you need to come up with $4 or $5 million. You don't have the other players. So unless you're giving up Keon Ellis, then at $2 million, then him and Colby Jones would equal the $4 million. You could get up to the dollar amount. So it's just really difficult. And so that's why when they made the move, you have to wonder, okay, is something big coming? Was it that they were working with a team and they said, hey, we'll do the deal, but we don't want to take on that contract? That happens in the NBA. But at this point, it's looking more and more and more like they just did this deal to get below the cap and below the tax. And again, I'm not going to blame them for that. It's, you need to manipulate the cap the way that you can.
They didn't even, the Spurs waived the dude.
Yeah.
It's not like they traded a rotation player to go like, oh, hey, it's so important that we get. No, they got rid of a guy who wasn't going to be on their team or who wasn't going to play.
The only
get a guy who might play a little.
The only thing you're concerned about in this deal is a 2031, 7 years from now, second round pick. That's the only thing that Kings fans should be worried about.
Do you know how long 7 years is?
It's a long time.
On this day 7 years ago, Jimmy Garoppolo was still on the Patriots.
Oh, yikes.
7 years is a long ass time, dude.
Yeah. Yeah. De'Aaron Fox was entering his rookie season.
Yeah. Come on.
He's now going into year 8. Yeah. Wild. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting. Yeah. When you look at the whole, you pull back and you look at the whole entire, what they're doing and why they're doing it. It's not simple. And they have to play like 3-dimensional chess. Like this, the salary cap adds this element that makes everything very confusing and very difficult to manage. And I know a lot of people just get all excited every time, our friend Sean Cunningham tweets out that, they're trading Jalen McDaniels to the Spurs, but there's something else happening. It's part of a sequence of events. And so everyone's like, oh my gosh, something big's happening. And sometimes it's not.
Well, same. Like that's human nature, though.
Yeah.
You hear, hey, they made this trade to clear up space because something else is happening. It's like, oh, snap. Here we go. And especially because there was all this stuff with Kyle Kuzma as recently as the draft. And you're thinking, okay, they're getting closer to the season. We just saw a Karl Anthony Towns move happen. That was a whole big trade. It's understandable that you'd get really excited when you hear, hey, they cleared all this space and now have what, 13 million to play with
under
the hard cap.
Yeah.
Like, oh man, you might get a nice little player.
Yeah.
And then Doug McDermott.